Thank you for coming back to watch part 2 of the Great-Granddaughter I Never Held. It's just a fantastic story as we go, and there's so much more, so just keep watching. But there's something I need to interject here that was going on. As I said, my husband at this time had Alzheimer's. And sometimes reality was just not there with him. But I had a couple dolls that I had purchased because I was going to be selling baby clothes on Amazon, and I needed these dolls to use them as like mannequins almost for the baby clothes. Now, I'm going to jump back or go back a little bit here now. All the time we're home, we're not, of course, can't see the baby at all, but we would get updates, maybe not daily, but we'd get a lot of updates and photos of the baby. And this was something I could share with him, and he would get very excited if there was a new photo. And I'd say, "Oh, we got a new photo." He goes, "Oh, we did?" And he was getting involved and falling in love with this baby just from the photos and the stories and her progress, because all of this was such a mystery to us. And I myself, because I'm always searching with the babies who they look like, whose eyes or nose or ears or hair or whatever. I couldn't quite nail it with Sterling. She had her own little look. But at first I was thinking I saw some resemblance, and then no. And we didn't know that with Kabuki syndrome, it's like when a baby has Down syndrome, they have their own little look. But, I would have recognized Downs right away. But this was such a rare disease. Now, if you'd like to look it up, Kabuki syndrome, you can. I found it on Facebook, and there's a group there. And there's photos of all the children. I'm thinking like most of them have dark hair. I know they have kind of large eyes, I think, long eyelashes. Just so many things in common. But like I said, there's just not many of them, but they're out there. And when Maddie and Kingsley heard about this, they, of course, looked up everything they could on this syndrome so that they'd be prepared to take care of little Sterling. They were excited about it. They knew it was going to be a big challenge, but they were ready for it. They were young and full of energy and love. So as I go back to my husband, my deceased husband, his name was Larry, and so Larry, for some reason, this one baby doll that I had with the dark hair, he was connecting baby Sterling with this doll. And when some of my grown grandkids, well, they were grown, but they came over and all got together. You know how kids all get together and they have their phone out and they're doing all kind of crazy stuff. And they had one where you could take people's faces and distort them, and they're just, cutting up and stuff. And the doll was sitting there on the fireplace with the dark hair. And we was wondering, will it work with a doll? And I seen that Larry was getting upset. And he says, "Don't do that, don't." And I said, and I told him, I go, "Oh, don't do that, because Grandpa, he somehow thinks that's the baby." So we were very careful about that. But the only photo I have of that was, I think, possibly, I'm not sure if Larry had passed away, but my sister purchased the 2 dolls from me because they were like brand new. And she purchased them for her granddaughter. So that's Sophia, my little great niece in there. And she's got the 2 babies, and she's totally delighted. I think she brought them over to the house one day That's what it was. It was after she'd purchased it. But yeah, so there's more. We're on our way to church, and when I come back, I'll tell you some more things. All right, hold on, and don't forget to come back. While she was in the hospital, the hours and days and months went on and on and on. And she just longed to talk to someone else who was going through the same thing. Well, as you know, as I said, COVID was going on, and plus the babies up there were so susceptible to every kind of germ. So everything was so isolated. And as I said, this was during COVID. Well, she was walking down the hall, and many times she would go by this room, and there was a young woman in there about her age. And she had a little baby. And they would just, after a while, just start kind of, waving at each other. But they wanted to talk, but they couldn't get together. So Maddie asked the nurse, he said, I would like to talk to that girl. And she told her what room. And she said, could you ask her if I could have her phone number, and maybe we could message each other from our rooms. So the nurse went down and asked her, and her name was Maggie. So we've got Maggie and we got Maddie. So they began talking on the phone and realized they both had a little girl, and both of them had a heart problem. A little bit different, but both of their babies had been operated on. So I don't know too much about the story, but I know that they would even go down to Ronald McDonald's house to eat, and their husbands, and so they became friends, very close friends. And Maggie said she just don't know what she would have done without Maddie in her life. And I know Maddie felt the same way. I mean, here we had someone going through the same thing. And that's what you need when you have any kind of problem. So keep in mind this story, because it gets very interesting. Well, I'm sorry to say, but we lost little Sterling on May the 11th. In fact, this May the 11th of 2025 should be 5 years old. And she passed away on the anniversary of her great-grandfather and I, my first marriage. And 9 days later, little Charlie passed away. Maggie came to the funeral for baby Sterling, and she still had her baby. Little did she know, 9 days later, she would lose her baby. Although this is tragic, one thing, we know where those babies are at. They're in their mama's future and their daddy's future. And that's a promise from the Word of God that they are. So an angel just took them up in their arms away from all their suffering. And they're whole now. They're perfectly whole now and waiting for their mother. Of course, there was great grief. Sterling's funeral was huge. They had her cremated. And her ashes were buried right by their home. And they planted a tree in remembrance of her. And there's a couple photos I'll put here. In Sterling's honor, they started a Sterling Strong Foundation. And they make gift boxes for people, families, these young couples who were in the hospital with these little babies. And I know inside the boxes they have Uber Eats gift cards. I'm not sure what that is, but if it says Uber, I'm sure that they can have food delivered there if they need it. And there's mugs, and they give them socks and decorations to make the room more cheerful because they're there for so long. She also has started, her and her husband Kingsley have started blood drives in Sterling's name. Like I say, it's been 5 years now, and they have faithfully been doing this. When Mr. Bill and I got married and I moved here to Tennessee, I had so many paintings, the whole back end of the Subaru was filled to the roof, that I donated to raise money. So, like Maddie said, she had so much support. Friends, family, the nursing staff was wonderful. I mean, she was just so blessed that way. But Maddie herself was a sweetheart. And it's just come back at her, you know? Now, there's more to this story. It's very interesting. So I guess I'm going to make that a part 3. It gets better. It gets good. You won't be crying. It's a good story.